getting a contract to play NSL here, but opening the doorways there. When you look at the landscape that you grew up playing in, and then you look at the landscape that is now being built, what are some of the things that you're excited about? But then also, what are some of the things that you feel still could be improved?
Well, I will say the system is a lot different now, and so it's already better, even pre this NSL. Like the fact that League One was created is
Yeah.
already a step up from what I was playing in, and so there have been like incremental
Mhm.
improvements in terms of not just getting yourself into the system, but then getting yourself recognized. I think was really hard. And I think in the past, a lot of it was like connection based, like who do you know?
Yeah.
So you can get a chance to try out I think it's a little bit more structured now. And I would like to think it's a little bit more fair. But with that said, Canada is just so huge. And to
Yeah.
your point about access, there are still going to be people who fall through the cracks, especially from like a diversity cultural perspective. Like you mentioned, the immigrant parents. I know in England, that's also a topic that gets mentioned a lot,
Yeah.
particularly for like the South Asian community, which is quite large
Yeah.
in England. And culturally, girls in sports, it's not as encouraged. And so there's that issue of trying to, and I think the similar exists in Canada. And so I think that while they've sort of created the infrastructure to better recognize talent,
Mhm.
there are still going to be people who probably need a little bit more work, a little bit more outreach, focused outreach to target certain communities to make sure they can get into that system. So yeah, I think like pros in terms of the work has been done and it's gotten better, but yeah, I don't think we can stop at this. I
Yeah.
think it still needs to get. I think it still needs to get better.
No doubt. This is like it's a moment to celebrate, no doubt, but it's by no means the finish line, right? It's a check
Mhm.
mark where we have to continue to develop and kind of go. You mentioned like the ideas of like representation and such. I wonder, how do I ask this question? We're just gonna ask it. Um, we look at like our national teams, for example. I have a lot of Honduran and like and El Salvadorian friends down here, so they always make the joke with me where like your team, your men's team, they look like you now. I'm like, what are you saying there? What do you just no, let's have this conversation. Let's talk. Um, and so like I know Crystal Dunn has the interview she did where it's when she was playing in England. Young players come up there and say, "Hey, you look like me. I feel like I can continue to press on in that because I see people who are like me who can continue on." Do you think, for me, I think I know the answer to that question, but do you think that we have done a good enough job of giving those platforms to those players, not necessarily as a token space, but more so of have we been able to open up for opportunities for players of all that diversity in Canada, or is that still again another checkpoint for us that we have to continue to grow on and continue to get better on?
In Canada specifically, you're
Yeah.
talking about Canada soccer or like the women's team? Because I do think the men's team is obviously a lot more diverse,
Mhm.
uh, just more black. Like let's say diverse, but really there's just more there
What?
are more black players on the
Never.
Canadian team. Um, although I will say that it's changed now, but I
Mhm.
actually felt I used to always feel a little bit of pride with the women's team,
Mhm.
always having more like black players, the
Ye-
Canadian ones than the US. Like the US women's team used to be very white.
yes.
And it's only been in like the past few years with like Mal Swanson, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, Naomi Gurma, like all of these players that started coming in. It used to just be like Crystal Dunn,
Yeah.
like Shannon Box, like way back. Like it was so limited, and so I
The
did
Brianna
always
Scurrys
like
of the world.
that about
Yeah.
Canada. But in terms of, I don't, I find that to be, I find that to be a tricky question because
Yeah.
yeah, I just think like it depends on, I don't know. I think it's a difficult question because for some people, in terms of like when you say platform, I think like putting them in the spotlight. I think
Yeah.
Keisha Buchanan has something right now related to Black History Month that's posted, and like that's what I
Yeah,
think of a platform. But there are some people who is just enough to just see the player on the team.
true.
Like that person doesn't need to be a spokesperson for like all of Black people. As
Mhm.
long as they see that there's diverse representation on the team, that could be enough for them to keep playing. And so I
No,
guess
that's
it kind of
true.
depends.
It does.
Where do
And
you,
I
I don't
think
know, where do you feel on that?
it's a tough one, and like I don't know if I picked the right wording to ask the question how I did, but I'm gonna go with the question I asked. I think you have to be able to see yourself in everything. And I think they've gotten better. I think there's many ways. I mean, the first Canadian football player that I saw, and I was like, I like you, was Charmaine Hooper, right?
Yeah, I knew you
Charmaine
were going
Hooper,
to.
like, but like this is like nine. I've said the story, like I feel like I said it my first few podcasts, but it's true. It's summer of '99. I'm in Ghana, with the family, and they're like, we're gonna Women's World Cup is on. I'm like, okay, let's watch this. And then I'm like, Canada. I'm like, we have one of those. Okay, this is a super gal. I like her. This is so like she's my introduction to anything Canadian footy for me, right? And so for
Yeah.
me, I watch her. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Now, as the years go on, right? Yes, you see the players who have come through, and not to say that it's necessarily one thing or the other. I think you could. There's an argument that you can make that over the last maybe 5 years, their best player on the pitch or one of their best players has been Ashley Lawrence. But you don't necessarily always hear that. You don't necessarily
Mhm.
hear or get the same applause that you get. And that's not to say the other players aren't great. The other players are great at what they do. Vanessa Gilles is one of the best center backs in the world. Kadisha Buchanan, when healthy, also one of the best center backs in the world. Oh, by the way, Jade Rose just kind of showed up and was like, "Hi, Sam Kerr. I'm just gonna, dust this up a bit, and then we'll."
Yeah.
There are players there. I think it's fun from a POC standpoint, when you look at the youth teams that are coming up, you're like, okay, yes, we just saw Ella Ati get her first cap yesterday in the Pintar Cup, but then you see the likes of an Olivia Smith and Amanda Allen. I think those two are more significant now than say others because they looked at the collegiate level and they left early. Amanda Allen spent 2 weeks in college. Was like Orlando, Heat, Syracuse. Nah, give me the sun. I'm out. Right. Olivia Smith had 1 year in Penn State and then she went over to Portugal,
So
1 year there,
sporting, yeah.
right? And then she's at Liverpool. And it's like you see that path. And now Geneva Hernandez Gray is like, and Sporting is
Yep.
like, if you could be like Olivia, come, come to. I
Yeah.
think they're blazing their own paths in a space where it doesn't. They didn't need to be trailblazers because other players had blazed a trail before, and now you look at them and you say, okay, you are now just standard. You're now options. You look at them and saying, okay, you don't need to go 4 years in college to be a professional. If you're good enough, you can bet on yourself. There are talented players who are watching you. They also did benefit from, again, which is one of the problems with some scouting, which is tournament scouting. They were seen at U17s and they're like, okay, that one, those are good. Bring them over to the academies and they're good. So I think platform may not have been the right word, but I think you see them and you appreciate what the paths that they are now taking. And I think as young players, now maybe it's a conversation of access from a younger age and keeping them in, because again, within Canada, there's the issues within club financing. There's the very famous words of it's a pay to play system type of a thing. Even looking at the tiers, you can just play football or you can play in the competitive leagues, and those leagues will get you scouted more. It's like, well, if you're good, you're good. Find you, but it's not always the case like that. So to re-ramble and get back to the beginning there, I think we've put our players in a position, regardless of who they are, regardless of race, in a space where, as Canadian footballers, they can now pave their own ways, and players coming up can look at them and say, I can follow into those steps because I've seen you do it before. Right? There will be another 7 Olivia Smiths coming because Olivia Smith was the first one to do it. Right? Just in the same way that we look at like the Chuku twins, and it's like, yeah, Annabelle is gonna be something great, but we've seen her do it, and someone's gonna say, in another 5 years, we're gonna have another person saying they're coming through. So I think they are in a position where they can continue to break grounds and break new levels. Is it where it could be? No. I think the problem is, again, we've seen a heavy transition with the US, and with because they're so close to us, that's what we always compare ourselves to. And the US, again, like you said, they went from barely any to just like, okay, we have Crystal Dunn is still here. Olivia Smith is here. Trinity Rodman is doing her thing. Jaden Shaw's still here. There's
Reading
still another
Shaw.
12 Thompson sisters, I think. Every time I look, there's a new Thompson sister. So I think when we compare ourselves to them, not to say that we shouldn't, but I think our players are going to have to break and make their own paths because we don't have, say, the system, we don't have the infrastructure, which is, I think, the biggest thing. Talking to like different small clubs, it's always infrastructure for them, right?
Yeah.
Getting pitches, getting time on those, that matters. And these are like your small clubs where they're like, yeah, we are a club who are just in Toronto. We're just dealing with kids who just landed. It's just immigrant kids club. It's like, get us a place where we can play. So I think they can, and they're going to continue to. But yes, you'd always love to see more. And I don't think it's a terrible idea to continue to put that emphasis on that, because the more you see those players, the more you keep that creativity and that possibility alive for them moving forward. You are
Let me,
wearing.
let
Go
me
on,
ask you something. Can I ask you?
go on.